Welcome to Local Board Duties. This is where we're going to talk real quickly about local board members and what you do, how you can do it. It's going to be real fast. We just did this. Brian and I did this up at the Arizona Fire District's convention last week, and they gave us an hour and a half. We did it in about an hour and 5 and stood around for 25 minutes answering questions, which is great. We'll be here all day to answer questions. But who am I and why am I here? My name is Dan the Man Hoover, former crime fighter extraordinaire. I retired in 2014 after 36 years with the Phoenix Police Department. For 23 of those years, I was an elected pension board member. And because Phoenix is the biggest and we get sued the most, and we have the most experience, way back when, and some of you might have been here way back when, a gentleman by the name of Ronnie Snodgrass, little Ronnie Snodgrass, and I used to give presentations on different parts of the pension law. After I retired, I wrote an email to the chairman of the Arizona Fraternal Order of Police, and I said, hey, I'm retiring, I might have some extra time on my hands. Can I volunteer to help you with some legislative issues? And we could write a speed ticket to that email when it came back. He goes, you're not kidding. You're not kidding, are you? And I said, no, I'll help you. So I am the chairman of the Arizona FOP Pension Oversight Committee.
And good morning. My name is Brian Moore. This is my 40th year in the fire service, starting this year. Started as a volunteer when I was a freshman in college. For the last 27 years, I've served with the Phoenix Fire Department. I'm a fire captain, paramedic on a heavy rescue truck working the west side of town. I began my local board involvement in 1998 when I moved into the Daisy Mountain Fire District. I got recruited. They said they needed a citizen board member. I had no idea what that was at the time. I came in, found out there was a lot to learn, so I started taking advantage of the PSPRS's educational opportunities back in 1998. In 2001, there was a fire district board member position open, actually 2 vacancies. Myself and a local physician ended up being appointed with those, and since then I've served on the Daisy Mountain Fire Board, and then by virtue of the title of chair of the fire district, you also get to serve on the fire pension board as the chair. So I've held that role for a number of years. In 2006, I was elected as a sworn member. You remember you're supposed to have 2 sworn members on every local fire or police board. 2006, I was elected as a sworn local board member for the Phoenix Fire Department Local Pension Board. And in that role, I've considered many disabilities, disability retirements, the different types we'll talk about later. Had to approve a number of line of duty survivor benefits, and also had the opportunity to be sued and be in case law. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, some of the things that you should be aware of as local board members. Also serve on the United Phoenix Fighters Association as an executive board member. I'm vice chair of the City of Phoenix's Deferred Compensation Board, which oversees $2.1 billion in assets of employee assets in our 401A, 457, and post-employment health plan. Also proud to have created or worked with several great folks to create as a result of the pension reform in 2016, the 401A DC plan, now the upcoming 401A plan for PSPRS. And then good or bad, I got appointed by the governor several months ago to serve on the board of trustees of PSPRS. So here I am. Before we roll any further, I'm just kind of curious. I'm going to see a show of hands of how many actual local board members are present here today. And I want to see if you're a chair, you're a civilian member, or you're a sworn member. Put your hands back up. You see a lot of hands not going up. So the rest of you must assume some kind of a role within that. HR related, local board secretary, I would imagine. Local board secretaries. Let's see hands of local board secretaries. Let's give them a big hand. Very well. You guys who serve as local board secretaries, or maybe you just got appointed a new local board secretary, there's a lot to learn, and you're the key to helping the whole process work. You also should have been selected by your local board for that role, but if you are doing it, PSPRS Law offers a lot of great opportunities for learning, and those that have long-term experience, you're very valued, and please pass on your information to others that may be here today filling those roles. Let me see hands up for sworn local board members. Who are police or fire sworn local board members? Raise them high. Okay, good. All right. Every year, it's my goal to get more and more sworn local board members in attendance at this conference because it's key, as it states in state law, what their duties and responsibilities are. We'll talk a little bit later on, but the number's been improving. Those that don't have members of their local board in attendance, I asked you to see that they can make it to our future conferences, as well as participate in the training programs and educational seminars that we do have. Stan.
Good enough. So let's do just a little bit of probably housekeeping homework here. Why is there such thing as a local board? The law requires it. You guys are supposed to administer those provisions of the law, which were covered a little bit by some of the other speakers. All approved agencies have a local board. The question is your local board legally impaneled? That's the first question an attorney's going to ask you if you call and ask an attorney to represent you. So your board should be legally impaneled. If you're here, I'm guessing that you're probably right. It's the ones that aren't here that we need to get involved in this thing. If you're looking for the numerous responsibilities, we'll refer you to 38847, which basically tells you here's your responsibility as a local board member, and then the other side is the uniform rules that they've got put out there. So your responsibilities are to decide eligibility, service credits, determine the amount, manner, time of payment. We're hopefully going to streamline that for you.
So what's happened in the legislative realm the last year or so with there was I wouldn't say an emphasis or attempt, the League of Cities and Towns had pushed really hard to some kind of consolidation of local boards. There's been a lot of pushback from various entities, one of them being the Arizona Fire District Association and other entities, the smaller cities and towns that have very effective local boards that have been operating and doing the things that they need to do and operating within state law. We've had others that have been operating on the fringe or even beyond what the state law is, and we've had complaints that have come into the PSPRS Board of Trustees and also through staff on various entities in regards to how they observe and follow state law. So what we have found is that the League of Cities and Towns wanted to consolidate and make one statewide board, and there are some other entities too pushing for that, but the PSPRS system was created in 1968. We had multiple different systems in the state at that time. And when everybody was brought together at that point, there was one thing that was desired by entities, and that was local autonomy, the ability to still make local decisions. So that's how we ended up here with the local boards today. As I told you about my fire service career, I started in Ohio. In Ohio, they had a centralized state board with the public safety retirement system. So if you had a disabling injury, very painful disabling injury, you had to drive 4 hours from wherever it may be in the state up to meet with this board to see if you were deemed worthy of meeting the requirements for a disability retirement. And you may have to make more than one trip up there. So if we had something like that, obviously it would be here in the great state of Maricopa if everything was consolidated. So say somebody from Page that suffered an injury, or say somebody from the far southwest corner of the state or southeast corner of the state would have to make the trip up. So we worked on local board consolidation pretty extensively. You heard about the law through Diane McAllister earlier, the proposed legislation that would allow some smaller boards to enter in IGA and do some consolidation. So we're going to continue to have the local boards. The law also has some teeth into it for the PSPRS Board of Trustees to take action if there's certain inaction or non-adherence to the law by local boards and staff and other folks involved. That is in this legislation session, but for now, it's going to stay within the local boards, and where you have the various, the two sworn members, the two citizens, as well as the chair of the local jurisdiction, if they so desire, or an appointee on deciding these cases. All these cases will be reviewed by PSPRS as well, just as they are now for legal purposes.
So One of the things the board has to do is you need to review your actuarial report. How many of you have got on and done it? I imagine some of the local board secretaries have done it. How many local members have got on it? How many elected guys have got on it? All right, PSPRS, and you go into the financial side, go down to the CAFR report, you have to navigate your way through there, but you can pull up your specific jurisdiction's actuarial report. And one of the page that I like to review at the actuarial report is the demographics of that page. It tells you everybody who's employed, everybody in Tier 1, Tier 2, tells you how many in Tier 3, tells you what your average salary is. It'll tell you how many people in drop, what the average drop is. You know, you can also look at your neighbor. You can look at any one of the 230 boards, you can look at them. So just because of this board's consolidation thing, trust me, I've looked at every one of your guys' actuarial reports and looked at your demographics. For the people on the financial side, that's the part that tells you what your costs are and what your contributions have to be and that sort of thing. So you're supposed to receive that actuarial review and you're supposed to review it and tell your employer about it. I know with the city of Phoenix, for all these years on the actuarial reviews, one of the first things we did is we turned and looked at it and said, how many people in the city of Phoenix have 20 years or more? Okay? How many people have 25 years or more? And why is that important? You know, because that means 20 years or more, if they have to, they can tell you goodbye. And at some point in time, with a big jurisdiction like Phoenix Fire and Phoenix PD, with Phoenix PD, that might be 30% of the employees can say goodbye tomorrow and leave. A little lower with fire, because they advertise every time they go to a call. We respond differently, you know, so they're like, you know, we're busy moving from cover to concealment, and they just take a defensive fire stance and wave at all the kids going by on a bike, okay?
No one minds a fire truck being behind them, but everybody minds a police officer being behind them. You all know that.
Yeah. So you could take a look at that. I strongly suggest to do that and just get a review of what your actual report says and that sort of stuff.
If you don't do anything else the entire year, you have no new employees, you have no disability or any applications for retirement, you should at least meet to do your review your actuarial report. And they just came out. They came out at the end of December, so you should have a local board meeting to post that on your agenda, include that in the minutes, and send that into PSPRS so that you are meeting and following the law.
And if you look at it, your local board, you can actually kind of project out what your business is going to be over the next 5 years. I know that the large to mid-sized departments use it as a 5-year planning tool way back when, because they knew there was a potential for so many people to leave. So there's information there. It's pretty dry. But for your elected members, when you're going to talk to people, if you go to the back, they do a summary of all the benefits. So if you go to the last chapter, there's a summary of all the benefits. Every one of them, that, you know, here's how it works and that sort of stuff. So there's a quick reference for you instead of going into the 38847 and all the codes there and trying to figure it out. That's where most firefighters get their information, because they don't know how to look legal things up. So,
in addition, one of the other things that you have the opportunity to look up on the PSPRS website that goes along with that is the system CAFR, the annual financial report, and that's been completed and posted as well. It's a pretty extensive document, and it covers all 3 systems. Remember, there's not only PSPRS, but there's the elected officials plan, and there's also CORP, the correction officers. So you can read more in depth about the system as well by pulling up and reading the CAFR.
So this is just going to be a real quick heads up, because I strongly suggest you go to the open meeting law training, either here or wherever it might be. But as a local board, each member is entitled to 1 vote. The majority of votes is necessary to make a decision. If you have 3 members present, how many votes for yes do you have to have a decision? 3. If you don't have 3 members, then you don't have a quorum. You can't call your agenda, so you kind of push things back. Can people call in on phone? Can you have people on phone? Yes, you can. Just make sure you post it on your agenda that members may call in on phone and that sort of stuff. So that's one of the things that you can do. Familiarize yourself with the open meeting law. Don't get yourself conflicted out. Don't get yourself paying fines. Don't give your board a big headache by inadvertently hitting reply all on your email, you know, and making a discussion about somebody's application. As one of the last things I did in the department is, so I had fun for 4 years. years because I was a SWAT lieutenant for 4 years. And when I left there, I went to Professional Standards Bureau, which is internal affairs, okay? Well, my second year in internal affairs, if you remember, there was some stuff that happened out at the airport with a lady who had an issue with some handcuffs and stuff. They did a public information request for everybody in internal affairs, and I had to go through and redact 15,000 emails that I had on my computer because they thought I might have been talking about those sort of things. So don't get your board in trouble by hitting reply all and discussing topics off the agenda that somebody does a public information request for and has to produce emails to you, and now you're trying to defend yourself.
So if you have a jurisdiction that, which many of you in here do, you know they have to follow the open meeting law for their city council, town council, fire district, excuse me, whatever it might be. You have to do the same. You are a public board and you're required to follow the open meeting law just as any city, town, council, board of supervisors, the exact same open meeting law. There is no provision for a local fire or local police pension board to do otherwise.
And the open meeting law also covers executive sessions.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's kind of our housekeeping stuff. Let's get to some of your goal as a board member, whether you're elected or you're appointed, or even if you're the chair. So what we like to think is your goal is to have a fair, impartial, timely, effective application process for somebody who applies for any form of disability. The process has to be objective. We don't want it to be subjective. What's your impression of industrial commission exams?
The industrial commission exams are, I would say, I call them less than objective medical exams because they're for the purpose of either terminating medical care or treatment, getting somebody back to work, and I can recognize them when a physician writes a medical report for us for the pension board who spends most of their time writing worker compensation industrial medical exams.
So it really doesn't matter who you send it to, the legal guy. Look, we're not going to eliminate bias. Most doctors out there want to do good things for the community. If you're a firefighter or a police officer and you get hurt, they feel bad for you. They want to do good things for you. The bottom line is your board and who you contract with, you want an objective. Is this person broken? Why are they broken? Why can't they work? You want an objective medical examination.
We recently had an applicant and we had to send them out for more than one independent medical exam. The applicant was a fire engineer who worked on busy engine companies that exceeded 4,000 to 5,000 emergency calls per year, a lot of getting up and down off the truck. The gentleman's knees were shot. We sent him out for an independent medical exam. It came back and the medical exam said this person could return to work. They could do some of the duties of a fire engineer, but they could probably be provided with a small ladder to do, the work that's necessary. But they weren't able to climb anything taller than a small ladder. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, "Are you kidding me?"
So wherever you go with this, the process, you must be prepared to withstand legal review of the record and your discussion and the decision you made, because that's what's going to happen if you don't grant one and they end up throwing you into court or they go through the appeals process, is they're going to look at how you came to your decision. So
sorry, you're on the third floor. I can only get up 3 steps on my ladder. You have to jump.
So how does the disability process start? Well, usually it either starts at the Human Resource Bureau, right, where they walk in and say, hey, my doctor says I'm disabled, I need to take my accidental disability next month. Or it might start at the local board secretary office. The City of Phoenix, we have COPERS, and they handle our PSPRS people. So people tend to walk up there and say, hey, my doctor says I can't work, I think I need to avail myself of a disability. And one of the first things COPERS used to do when I was there, and I assume they still do it, is they'll give you the paperwork, but they'll also say, hey, did you call Stan Hoover? Have you talked to Brian Moore? Why? Because you elected pension board members are supposed to be the ones that can help fill them in as to how the process works, okay?
In fact, in state law, that is one of the requirements of local board members to educate fellow employees. They're supposed to be talking to their members as they come forth to ask questions about the PSPRS system, the process, what's involved. One of the most common things that I see is that well-intentioned folks, both physicians, medical providers, and whatnot, will tell somebody, you need to go apply for a medical. Well, that's kind of like wide open. Number one, we don't have medicals, meaning a medical retirement. We have accidental disability retirements, and we have 3 other types of disability retirements. But what I come to find in a number of cases is that they haven't explored all the different options. Maybe it's some additional physical therapy that they need. And they're actually told that because their worker compensation benefit was cut off, and the physical therapy that they need to continue has been terminated. The other thing that I see frequently are members that come and they've had a debilitating back injury, and they've got, from my lack of a better description, steel and concrete and rebar in their back. That's what's holding them together, keeping them upright. Surgery has just occurred. They say, hey, I got to apply for an accidental disability retirement. My first question is, are you stable and stationary? And they're like, well, what does that mean? Has your doctor officially said, you're done, you're complete, we've done everything we can? And they go, no. I go, well, we're going to table, if you apply now, we're going to table that application until you reach the point, probably 6 or 7 months is typically what it is post-surgery when it's of that magnitude, that they are stable and stationary, where the doctor says you're going to have permanent restrictions. You can't lift more than 10 pounds. You can't put 80 pounds of fire protective clothing on you with the air bottle, the pack, and climb up and down a fire truck and a ladder. You have permanent restrictions. They're not temporary, and you're stable and stationary. So those are some of the key things that I see when folks approach me for questions about the process.
Yeah, so usually for the elected guys, if you're in the fire department, the conversation occurs in the house where you're sitting in the Barca lounger. If you're in the police department, you're probably window to window in a car, and somebody comes up and you're an elected pension board member, and somebody says, hey, I talked to my doctor, or he calls you on the phone and says, I talked to my doctor says I need to take a medical. And it's like, wow, that's really unfortunate. What's really unfortunate is it's not what your doctor says, it's what my doctor says. So let's talk about your injury. Let's talk about the history. Let's talk about the medical record. Let's talk about the industrial medical record of your injury. You have to have an injury that totally and permanently prevents you from performing a reasonable range of duties that was incurred in the performance of your duties. And you have to terminate by reason of that accidental disability. If that person thinks that they fit that bill, then you tell them, if you believe you qualify, then you tell them to apply. And you have them go down, if they really want to be a stickler, they can download the application right off of the thing. But there's a whole ton of medical evidence that needs to be amassed before it happens. I know in the city of Phoenix, I think it's probably the fastest you can do in the city of Phoenix is 60 days with no question, but it's probably more like 90 or 120 days.
What's that, gathering the medical information?
Well, no, for an accidental disability process.
That would be with the green lights and the one behind your back, and it doesn't happen very often. The big challenge is we have a private sector third-party vendor for our third-party administration of worker compensation, who at this point is responsible for providing the medical records. That seems to be the big delay right now. We're looking at up to 6 months before we get the medical records for that person for it to come before the board for us to consider the case. The problem is many of these folks, they're unable to work any kind of light duty. So subsequently, they're on and they've been off more than 1 year. Our city provides 1 year of full pay for an individual if they're off. After that, they get the statewide average monthly wage benefit, which is 66 2% of the statewide average monthly wage under workers' compensation. That's not their wage, okay? There's a lot of confusion amongst that I see around the state. It's a paltry amount. So they're living on that. They still have a family, a mortgage, expenses, and so forth. The other thing is their case has been closed on the worker comp side because they're considered stable and stationary, but they can't come back to work. And subsequently, they're waiting on their accidental disability retirement. Maybe they only have 3 or 4 months of leave left, and now they're without a paycheck. So that's been a big issue for us. We're looking at some measures to take to get our records in a more prompt and timely manner. As Stan said, those were the golden years when we had things resolved in 3 to 4 months, maybe a little bit longer. Now we're waiting at least that long before we get our medical records from the third-party administrator, work comp provider on the injury.
So it starts with an applicant who submits an application in some form of documentation or goes in search of those documents. I can't say this loud enough, and you'll hear it again this afternoon. It is the applicant's burden to convince you that they qualify for an accidental disability or one of the other 3 disabilities. It's not you, the board. It's not the cities. It's their burden to convince you that they qualify. The local board can accept that packet for review, and then can the local board, let's go back. Can a secretary in HR deny an application? No, just take it. Take it, put the burden on the board. Okay, so the local board accepts the application packet, and they start to review it. So you have a guy who's on his way to work, shift starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 1:15, he gets off the freeway and he's sitting at a red light and he gets rear-ended by a pest control truck. Fire comes out because it's a hazardous waste spill. They advertise all the way out there.
Thank you. We do it very well.
So he's on his way to work. Shift doesn't start for 45 minutes. Everything gets taken care of. Fire packages him up. You know, he does that, flops like a fish and heads off to the hospital, and he has all sorts of things. And he has a back injury. Okay, you have a back injury. So then he comes forward about 6 or 7 months later, and he says, hey, I'm going to apply for an accidental disability. He says, I got hit on the way to work. I said, well, to and from work might be covered by industrial. It's not covered by PSPRS. I says, but you can apply. Person applied. Didn't make it past the application process because it was clear from the date and time of the accident, date and time of everything, and all that sort of stuff. We denied it before we sent it out to an independent medical exam. So if you have a reason to deny it that you can defend like that where it wasn't covered, then the board can take that action. So the board has 90 days to take action on an application, right?
Yes, and that used to be not the case. There was a case, I believe it was involving a law enforcement agency, a small jurisdiction outside the metro area that had an application by a law enforcement officer that was hurt in the line of duty. Couldn't come back to work, exhausted all of his leave time, applied for an accidental disability through their local agency, and I'm not even sure where it was. And 6 months into it, there had been nothing done, not even acknowledging of a CEDAR application, what have you. And that was the what actually pushed to create the state law that you have to do something within 90 days. It doesn't mean you have to resolve it, but you have to do something, at least formally acknowledge. The board should meet and acknowledge the application because, in many cases, the record's not clear, it's not complete.
Sure, the board can meet, look at all the medical records and say, okay, well, we're going to accept your application. We think they're outstanding medical records. So now we've met, we've reviewed your stuff, and we're saying, hey, you need to go get this for us. Remember, whose burden is it to prove? You. So now you've taken action. Okay, so now that the burden is on him to get back with you. Okay, so on the other side of the coin, you have a line of duty. Clearly, it's a line of duty incident, and you get that packet, and it's got the appropriate medical information with it, and that sort of stuff. How do you build a medical record? What is and is not in that medical record? Are there industrial packets? Are there past industrial packets? Let's use the case of a person who has a knee injury, and he gets sent back to full duty. He's got a knee injury maybe at 12 years. Gets put back to full duty. He has a knee injury at 15 years, and they do a little bit of surgery. And the one thing the least amount of sick time is used by police and fire. We want to be back to work. We want to leap tall buildings in a single bound and drag hoses halfway across the football field. That's what we go to work for, okay? So he goes back to work, and then suddenly he has another minor injury, but there's a deterioration of that. The question is, are there continuing industrial packets that say you got hurt, we fixed you, you got hurt, we fixed you, it's getting worse. Doctor says you got a total knee replacement coming in about 2 or 3 years, and you hurt it again, the doctor says you just hurried it up. Okay, so get all those records. Get all those records. Okay? Are there records from their personal physician, such as the gentleman who applied for an accidental disability with us and confessed to his doctor that he injured himself playing shortstop at a softball game? Okay? All right? Are there personal records? If there's reference in there for personal records, send them back out to get them. All right?
The industrial process works both ways. You'll find that some insurance companies, such as Copper Point, 7710, and then some of the third-party administrators are very, very much scrutinize every claim. So one of the things by looking at that information, you'll be able to find out, look at that. Like I said, it cuts both ways. The IME reports that I see that are frequently done on the IME side, there are some good ones, but I've seen a lot of bad ones. But you just got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. But that's important information that will help outline the case, the injury, especially will some of the physician informations from the surgeons. If it's an orthopedic case, somebody applied, they were completely disabled because of their shoulder. The medical information in the packet from the surgeon was very clear. It said once they opened the person's shoulder up, it truly was a mess. The worker comp physician was saying, oh no, this person can go back to lifting ladders and all these other things. So, you got to look at both medical information, both sides, very, very carefully.
So the other thing is, what's the status of your employee? Are they on full duty, applying for an accidental disability if they're on full duty? Hello? Okay. Are they on light duty, no work status, leave without pay, long-term disability? So we have a kind of a phrase that say you can't be working Monday and be disabled Tuesday. You can't sprain your ankle yesterday and say I'm retiring on a disability tomorrow. Why? Because you have to go back through your rehab. You're not stationary. There's all sorts of things that have to be done. We had a guy come in and say, I sprained my knee during the physical fitness portion of our academy type thing, and he says, I'm retiring. I want to retire next month. It's like, well, what have you done? Well, the bottom line is he sprained his knee, and he didn't want to wait to get it fixed because he had an offer to go to work in the private sector. So he's thinking, I'm going to get a double whammy here. So ask the right questions and slow the people down. What's the past history? Are there personal rights? Is it stationary? We talked about that. Let's talk briefly about your building a medical record for review. And you need to have legal counsel at your board when you're doing that. And your legal counsel needs to be independent of the employer or any employee organization. Are there any horror stories related to that, Brian?
Yes, absolutely. So we get calls from a number of folks from across the state from time to time regarding the employer attorney serves as the local board attorney, which is wrong. The contracted attorney for the jurisdiction serves as the local board attorney. That's wrong. What it should be is that there's clearly independent legal counsel that owes its loyalty to the board only, not the members, not the employer. And the upcoming legislation that we have going in is going to clarify this in a way, as well as provide or require ongoing education for those folks that are involved.
Well, I'm not saying that some jurisdictions think it's much easier to have somebody take an accidental disability than it is to terminate them because there's misconduct in the workplace. But I'm telling you it happens, okay? That's a clue, all right? So, we talked about, the legal people talked about those, or the legislative people did. Here's, look, there's highly efficient, effective, and objective boards out there. We thank you. You're doing a great job. But there's some dysfunctional boards, and PSPRS over the course of the last year or two has decided they intend to fix them. That's why you see in some of this legislative proposals where we're going to ask people to end up actually going to some form of training where you sit down and get a little bit of training to help you with your self-confidence. For you firefighter guys, I would treat an accidental disability like your chance to be a cop and do some real investigation, okay?
Not biting on that one.
So, but here's some things you probably should be aware of. Open meeting law, ethics, legal, fiduciary review, Title 38. Like I say, look in your actuarial report and just get a quick update on that. Your local responsibilities, local board guidelines, which are uniform rules, and how you build this record for review. And then eventually, talk to other jurisdictions that have had trouble. And one of the things you can do is, there's 10 large jurisdictions here in the state of Maricopa. And if you go in or you call them, you can get the minutes to the meetings where, you know, they had a very controversial application, or they denied an application, and they'll send you the minutes. Was Scott Stevenson here? Anybody here from Phoenix? I'm going to throw you down. There you go. Because I just met with him last month, and he says, we get calls all the time. He says, because I tell them to call you. Okay? So read the minutes of other boards on how they approach the problem solving to grant a difficult one or to deny a difficult one. And sometimes in the course of your board meeting, it's okay to think out loud so you create a record, because not only do you have an attorney, but you probably have a court reporter there. You don't have to have it transcribed, but you have a court reporter there. Because when you go to court, if you deny one and you go to court, your appeal is going to be heard in court on the record that you produced. The law enforcement guys understand that, okay? So.
You know, it's sometimes difficult. We had a member that clearly had an injury that affected him long term. It was a serious back injury. In the city of Phoenix, there's been this obscure rule that you had to work your last day. Okay, show up for work on your last day. Somehow he interpreted that someone gave him some bad information, all right? Work means, hey, if you're on light duty, you show up in whatever your alternative assignment or light duty position is. Somehow someone gave him bad information that he needed to go back to his actual assignment, which was on a fire truck. So he got clearance, he got back to the fire truck that day, and then he applied for the accidental disability retirement. He'd been on light duty for an extended period of time, had multiple surgeries and so forth. But when he came before us, you know, knowing he'd been injured, and we look at his attendance history and see that the last day he actually was back on a fire truck. And we said, sorry, we're going to have to deny moving this application forward because your last day of employment was on a fire truck. He says, hey, I was told I had to go back to work on my last day, and I went back to my position. We said, sorry, the law is pretty clear, and we make all of our decisions with legal counsel. And that's why I have to emphasize to you and here then on local boards that, you know, you are responsible for selecting your legal counsel. You know, not your local board secretary, not your HR director, not the fire chief of your fire district. You are, because they're the ones that are going to represent you if you go to court. We had a very competent attorney, still do, because the gentleman in question turned around and sued us when we denied his accidental disability application. It went all the way up to the Court of Appeals. It's case law today, but it essentially said that we were right in denying that because that provision that what was he doing on his last day? He showed up at work. Did I feel terrible because he had a long-term occupational injury? Absolutely. Did I feel bad that you know, he has permanent impairments? Absolutely. But you know, we were required under state law to you know, make the ruling the way that we did, and he certainly had the right to go ahead and sue us, and did.
So we got the sign here that says we're getting real close to getting out of here. So I don't know how much time we have, but I'll leave you with this.
4 minutes?
4 minutes?
Yep, that's what I got.
Do you know how to tell if you got an accidental disability right? Do you know how to tell after 23 years? And when that vote goes around and the motion is made, I make a motion that Lieutenant Stan the Man Hoover, former crime fighter extraordinaire, take his accidental disability due to a replaced right knee. I've reviewed the medical report by Dr. So-and-so and so-and-so, and he totally permanently prevents him from doing a reasonable range of duties, and he's going to terminate his employment by reason of this disability. And the vote goes around the table, and there's 5 votes that say yes. Look at the applicant's eyes. Look at the applicant's spouse, partner, whatever. If they're tearing up, you got it right. Because nobody came here to be told you're broken and you can't work and you got to go home and you haven't made a retirement plan. That's how you know you got it right. When you're leaving your board and you're walking down the street and you see a guy high-fiving another guy and they're going to go out camping and shooting and raising hell, you might have still gotten it right, but it might not mean as much as it should have, or you might got scammed and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. It just tastes bad.
Absolutely. And the same thing on our side. No one signs up for the fire department. Same with police, law enforcement, lead broken. Even though many do, some more than others, and we see some difficult cases.